Your baby already knows your voice, not after they are born, not after the first feeding, or the first night, or the first week of hearing you speak. Before any of that, right now, if you are pregnant, your baby is listening, and not just hearing noise. Actually listening, building a memory, forming a preference. The evidence for this is not soft or speculative. It comes from controlled laboratory studies, from newborn behavioral research, and from one of the most precise measurements in developmental science. And what it shows will change how you think about everything that happens before birth. The human auditory system begins developing around 18 weeks of pregnancy. By 24 weeks, the structures of the inner ear are complete enough to detect sound. By 28 weeks, fetuses show measurable responses to external sounds, changes in heart rate, changes in movement, but detecting sound is not the same as recognizing a voice. Here is where it gets remarkable. Sound does not travel cleanly into the womb. It is filtered. The amniotic fluid, the uterine wall, the layers of tissue between the outside world and your baby, all of it changes what reaches them. High-frequency sounds are dampened significantly. Sharp consonants soften. The crisp edges of speech blur. But one thing comes through with extraordinary clarity: the low-frequency patterns of a human voice, the rhythm of speech, the rise and fall of intonation, the melodic shape of language. And whose voice produces those patterns most directly, most clearly, most constantly? Yours. Your voice does not travel to your baby through the air the way every other voice does. It travels through your body, through bone conduction, through the direct vibration of your chest, your throat, your skull. This means your voice reaches your baby at a fundamentally different quality than any other voice they will ever hear. Richer, closer, cleaner. Researchers at the University of North Carolina studied this in the 1980s using a remarkably simple but elegant method. They recorded mothers reading a short passage of text, a children's story, repeatedly during the last 6 weeks of pregnancy. After birth, they gave newborns a specially designed pacifier connected to audio equipment. The rate at which the baby sucked the pacifier controlled which recording played. The newborns consistently modified their sucking pattern to activate the recording of their own mother's voice. Not a stranger's voice, not a familiar female voice. Their mother's. Within hours of birth, these were babies who had never heard their mother's voice from the outside, who had no visual memory of her face, who had no experience of her smell, her touch, or her presence in the world. And they already knew her voice. The researchers concluded that the preference was formed in utero, that the auditory memory had been built during pregnancy, that the voice your baby heard through the walls of the womb was distinct enough, consistent enough, and repeated enough to become the most recognizable sound in the world to them. Before we go further, it is worth pausing on what that finding actually means. A newborn baby has been in the world for hours. They cannot focus their eyes. They cannot hold their head up. They cannot regulate their own body temperature. Every system in their body is still figuring out how to function outside the womb. And yet, their auditory system, the part of their brain that processes sound, already has a preference, already has a memory, already knows the difference between the voice of their mother and the voice of every other woman on the planet. That is not a coincidence. That is evidence of something that was built over months, quietly, consistently, without any effort from anyone. A follow-up study went further. This time, mothers read 2 different passages during the final weeks of pregnancy. One passage was read repeatedly, the other only once or twice. After birth, newborns showed a clear preference for the passage they had heard most often, not just for the voice, but for the specific content. They recognized the story. The fetal brain was not just registering sound. It was encoding specific patterns, storing them, organizing them into something that functioned like memory. Researchers call this fetal auditory learning, and it does not stop at voices. Studies have shown that newborns prefer the language spoken by their mother during pregnancy over other languages, even languages they have never heard from the outside. Studies have shown that newborns can distinguish their native language from a foreign one within days of birth because the rhythmic and melodic patterns of that language are already deeply familiar. There is a study from researchers in France and Canada that made headlines in the scientific community. They played two different languages to newborns, the mother's native language and a completely unfamiliar one. The newborns showed measurable differences in their sucking patterns when the languages switched. They heard the difference. They responded to it, not because they understood the words, but because one pattern was already encoded, already known, already part of who they were becoming. This is what makes fetal auditory learning so astonishing. It is not passive, it is not accidental. It is the earliest form of what we would recognize in an older child as learning. The fetal brain is doing exactly what brains do, finding signal in noise, extracting patterns, building a model of the world it is about to enter. And the most detailed, most reliable, most repeated signal it receives is you. The brain that processes all of this is not a passive receiver. It is an active learner. From well before birth, the fetal nervous system is doing exactly what it will spend the rest of life doing. Finding patterns, building predictions, creating maps of the world it is about to enter. And the most important pattern it finds is you. Think about what this means. Every time you spoke during your pregnancy, every phone call, every conversation, every time you sang along to a song, every time you read aloud, every time you told someone how you were feeling, your baby was listening, not understanding the words, but learning the shape of them, the rhythm, the emotion underneath. There is something in the prosody of speech, the way pitch rises when we are excited, the way it softens when we are tender, the way it steadies when we are calm, that carries emotional information, even without words. And research suggests that fetuses are sensitive to these patterns, that the emotional coloring of your voice during pregnancy is not just sound, it is data. It is information about the world and about the person speaking that the fetal brain is quietly filing away. Some researchers have suggested that this is why newborns are calmed more easily by their mother's voice than by any other, not just because it is familiar in an abstract sense, but because the specific emotional patterns in her voice, the cadence she uses when she is soothing, the particular frequency of her calm, are already mapped in the infant's nervous system. Your baby did not just memorize your voice, they memorized the feeling of it, and building, quietly and continuously, a recognition of the person they would meet on the other side. Which is why, when your baby is placed on your chest after birth and you speak, even before they can see your face clearly, even before they know what faces are, something in them already knows. Not the voice of a stranger, not the voice of someone new, the voice they have been hearing for months, the voice that traveled through bone and tissue and fluid to reach them, the voice they built their first memory around, yours. If this changed how you think about those months before birth, subscribe to Baby Mind Secrets. Every week we go behind the moments that shape your baby, including the ones that happen before you ever meet them. And tell us in the comments, did you talk or sing to your baby during pregnancy? What did you say?